Welcome to Below the Line, where we talk about working in Hollywood from the crew perspective. My name is Skid. I'm a former assistant director and your host.
Quiet on the set.
Welcome back. This episode kicks off season 24 of the podcast, and today we're talking about Thunderbolts, the latest superhero extravaganza set in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. My guest is Assistant Property Master Travis Bobbitt. Travis, this is your second appearance on the show, and it's great to have you back.
Thanks for having me back, Skid. I appreciate it.
Also joining us this week in the co-host chair is Gianni Damaia. Glad you could join us for this one, Gianni.
Always happy to be back. Thank you, Skid.
Now, a warning for listeners, today's conversation will contain spoilers. The film's been performing well in theaters for just over a month now, and if you haven't seen it, I recommend you catch it there. Let's get right into it. Travis, last time you were on the podcast, it was season 5, episode 8, and we talked about Avengers Endgame. That was back in 2020, and you shared so many stories that I was honestly afraid you might have gotten into trouble.
No, I mean, I don't think I'm pretty careful about violating any NDAs that I have. And I know the boundaries. They grill it into us pretty strongly, and all the social media rules and Marvel global security are on all my devices. So if I cross the line, I'll be the first one to know. But yeah, no, I mean, I'm there every day and I'm on the ground and I'm with everybody on set, shot for shot. So I guess, yeah, the stories abound. So I'm excited to get into this one and see what I can share that people don't know yet.
It's a relief for me, and I'm glad you could get back on the show to talk about Thunderbolts. And I want to hear more about what you've been up to in between. But first, recap for any new listeners your personal history with the MCU, which I remember from last time goes all the way back to Iron Man.
Yeah, exactly. I started with the MCU on Iron Man 1, was even there for the Robert Downey Jr. camera test before he was officially cast. And I might have to share a photo with you or something, Skid. I have a photo I found of myself doing the very first Mark 1 camera test, and where we were testing the arc reactor on the chest. It's me and the Mark 1 and the very first camera test at Howard Hughes Studios out in LA there. So
we would love that. Do please, send that over, Travis.
Yeah, I'll send it over. And I found a few cool little things. I think it was on some, Marvel promotional YouTube or something. I'm like, hey, there I am on that first camera test. So, but yeah, my dad, actually, I have to give credit to. He's a longtime prop master and designer and developer of a lot of the iconic Marvel props. And I've worked with him for my entire working career, which is over 24 years. So we've done a lot of other movies as well with Sony and Paramount and things as well. But Lou D'Esposito, I think, goes way back with my dad, and they had done movies like Zathura in the past and had created a very strong bond. And they called us for Iron Man 1, and we went out and did it. And it's kind of the rest is history from there. And the resume that I've come up with and that my dad has come up with as a result has just been amazing. A handful of the top grossing movies of all times. And we were there designing and creating the props and creating stories. So it's really, really cool. I'm appreciative to have been a part of the journey for sure.
Now, when we talked in 2020, again, Avengers Endgame was kind of a culmination of those. I can't remember if that was just phase 1 or a couple of phases, what they called it, but it was just on the cusp of the television shows starting up, right? And you were going on to do,
right,
I believe, Falcon and Winter Soldier at the time, and there were shows going in parallel. And we kind of had some ideas about where it was going. Now, though, 5 years later, talk to me about what you have been up to more specifically and how these 5 years have unfolded.
Yeah, it was actually super chaotic, more than it had ever been in my career. Usually a prop department would work on one show at a time. I had never done the streaming/television world before, which is much faster pace, shooting a lot more pages per day and things like that. And corporate at Marvel approached Russell, my dad, and said, hey, and like, the special effects department heads and a few of the key department heads to say, hey, we want to put out a lot more content a lot faster for Disney Plus and some streaming stuff. And they created the whole streaming wing. And they said, can you guys do multiple shows at a time? Do you think you can scale in that way? A lot of the department heads took it on. They had been longtime employees, just like myself. And we did it. And it was absolutely chaotic, but it was fun. So what I've done since we spoke last was Falcon and Winter Soldier. And then Went on to, we did She-Hulk, did Guardians 3, Spider-Man No Way Home, Captain America, Brave New World that just came out, Thunderbolts that just came out. However, those were my shows that I was working the set on. But on the in-betweens, there was any downtime, or sometimes if I was in prep or wrap, I would be helping to prep Agatha, and I would be helping to prep, well, it was called Big Red. The code name was Big Red, but it was WandaVision and all of the other shows that, Loki that was going on. So definitely was a part of all of them, and I knew what was going on with all of them, and reading a lot of all of the scripts and things. And then our core crew that used to do one movie at a time, we actually had three prop master level people on our crew anyway. And so then we kind of divide and conquered. And then Russell, our boss and my dad, he was the head of Marvel props, and he oversaw all the design and every show. And so he became a lot more of like a strange, but almost like a corporate position where he was having meetings with the directors and design meetings and making sure that he was designing everything and then manufacturing it all and distributing it to the heads of each show, who were then there working the set and handing it off to the actors, doing all the repairs when they break, and all the normal stuff. So it was kind of neat. And then that kind of died down in the in the Thunderbolts world. And then we all came back together for Thunderbolts after a strike and a threat of a strike and all sorts of other things. And Thunderbolts ended up getting, in my opinion, in every department, got so lucky because everyone wasn't working. So we went from everybody's working and we're kind of dispersed on all these little shows to nobody's working and the only shows going on is Thunderbolts, and it got the best gaffer, and it got the best grips, and it got the best prop department all in one. Like, you had people that were like the gaffer on Loki or one of the streaming shows is like the third electrician, and some of our, our fourth prop person was like an assistant property master on some of the streamers. So the level of quality of employee on Thunderbolts, just, I mean, it was kind of serendipitous, bringing it all full circle from what has been going on these past few years to Thunderbolts is like, we expanded and then it kind of like relaxed, and then all the best people ended up on that crew. And I didn't even know if Jake Schreier, the director, even realized that at the beginning. Like, he didn't realize what had just happened as much as we all did. But we all knew it was going to be something special for sure.
That makes a lot of sense because it's funny listening back to that Avengers Endgame episode with you guys, which just to like shout it out to the audience. Like, if you haven't heard that episode, it's so good. It really is so good. It teaches you so much about the industry, and I think it's very, very important that they go back and listen to it if they haven't. But I remember when you were talking about working on Avengers Endgame and how it was essentially a divide and conquer over the course of 2 years. Did you feel like these last, so 5 some odd years of working on Marvel projects was kind of the same sort of basic principle, just so happens to be different named projects, but it really was the basis of we're just going to divide it up as this team and then just keep working, sort of some in sync like that.
Yeah, I mean, you could see how the progression of the producers and of Disney and Marvel seeing what they could do at scale with Avengers could give them the confidence to attempt what had just been done over the last 5 years. Because the scale was so big, because there was such a pool of talent from below the line perspective, that kind of gave them the confidence to push a little bit and say, what can we get done? Can we do 3, 4, well, call it 2 features a year and 3 streamers a year, where we're doing 5 projects a year? And so, yes, I think is the answer to your question, is that just like all humans, I hope we strive to grow and continue to grow and see what we can accomplish together as a team. And yeah, I mean, I know that there's a lot of critics out there to say what has happened in the last 5 years and how that has affected the MCU. And no doubt when you're pushing out a lot more content, there will be scrutiny about the stuff that didn't get as much attention or something like that. But I will say, from behind the scenes, we were all working really, really hard and putting our best foot forward to just do something that I feel like has never been done before. I liked it. I've gained lifelong friends, and now it's been think 19 years with Marvel, and so the last 10 of them have been just amazing and crazy all at the same time. And even like I don't know, I'm just gonna do some shameless self promotion. They even put me in She-Hulk. I got a little cameo, and so it's just been so fun. It's just been really really cool. And my text threads with friends from all these different movies are grown and grown, and we all play golf together now, and we do family things together, axe throwing or whatever, and we've now traveled the world together. Like we've been to England, Scotland, Prague, Puerto Rico, Malaysia, Thailand. I mean, like we've traveled the world together. We've made amazing art, and we've become really good friends. And yeah, it's just been crazy.
Well, Skid will have to redo your introduction to include actor then.
Yes, yeah, no doubt, no doubt.
What episode and what was your scene in She-Hulk, Travis? That went right by. I didn't pick you out.
It's brief, but for the first time in my life, I mean, okay, I'll just get right to that. I think it's episode 3 or 4. Right at the beginning, I was one of the social media guys that was talking about She-Hulk and giving their opinion on She-Hulk. And I'm glad to say that I got the least offensive one. I was going to use a different word, but I got the least offensive one because Kat, the director, and I got along so well. I feel like I worked really hard for her, and she also worked really hard on that show. I know she had a lot on her plate, and I enjoyed that show so much, and I got along with everybody so well. But and I think I got some heat for it because I think a lot of the other crew members had gone and tried to audition for that part, and I did not at first. And Kat texted me one night and said, "Hey, can you send me an audition tape for these these 3 different parts? I want you to be one of them. But she's like, I choose you. I have to turn this into corporate. You have to audition." And I realized why is that there were so many crew members that had auditioned to be these kind of, pardon my French, these kind of douchey guys that are talking crap about a female superhero. And so I was like, "Oh, I'm glad you see me as one of these characters, Kat, just naturally." But anyway, yeah, I was one of the social media guys who was doing it. And I was running a first unit and a second unit that day. And then I had to go act. I never saw my star trailer, even though I had one. I took a quick picture of it, but I never went inside. I was so busy. We were on location that day, and it was just, I was pulled aside, running first unit, pulled aside to second unit, acted, made sure my second unit prop people were okay, went back to first unit and continued my day. But it was kind of fun, and I like it. And they left it in. It was great. She said I crushed it as a douche, I guess, for lack of a better term. I don't know.
Well, I really enjoyed the She-Hulk series, but, and you kind of alluded to it, Travis, it's fair to say, and this isn't casting any shade, that the projects in the last 5 years, the reviews have been up and down. There's been a mix of some projects have succeeded and some projects haven't. But from what you're saying, it sounds like, jumping us forward now to Thunderbolts, it's getting great reviews, as I alluded to earlier. It's doing really well at the box office. And a lot of people are calling it a return to form. It sounds like you guys had a sense of that when you were on the film. And so talk to me more about bringing this crew together and how things kicked off for Thunderbolts.
It was a very strange transition for me. I was on Blade that didn't really come together, and then the strike happened, and so then I was unemployed for a while, which was fine for me because, like I had said, the previous 5 years with Marvel had been not only back-to-back shows, but back-to-back and simultaneous shows. So I was definitely welcoming a break at that time. So I did some vacation with my family and some things, and so I was well rested and excited to get back to work. So anyway, I had just come off Blade and read a lot of versions of the script, and it had kind of gone through some transition. And I think a lot of people on that project had read those scripts and weren't feeling it. And so then to go on to Thunderbolts and read a script that I was actually excited about, that actually had 3 full acts already that you could read, and that you could start to see the vision just from reading the script. And it was clearly articulated. I think Jake, the director, did such a great job with the emotion and with the characters, with the casting. I mean, all of it, a lot of the casting was already preset, of course, like always, but you could just tell the energy change immediately upon reading the script. And so I think that's where it started to come together. as a difference from the chaos of some of the shows that weren't getting such great reviews. I also had just done Captain America: Brave New World, which I think everybody knows at this point had undergone some pretty significant reshoots and things. And Mackie's a great friend of mine after all these years. Again, one of those ones that we've golfed together all around the world, and so I know he cared so much about that film and would come in worried each day about it all. And, I was there for him and we were there for him as much as we could be. And I know it didn't get the great reviews, you know what I mean? And I felt bad about that because he worked so hard and he's such a great guy and he's such a great actor. And Julius, the director as well, such a sweet guy and put 110% of his effort into it. And again, it's a great movie, but that shade is out there. People have really high expectations after a movie like Endgame or movies like No Way Home that are hitting $2 billion in the box office. It's like not every single movie every time is going to be a top grossing movie of all time. It's like you just can't do that every single time. And so to say that Brave New World deserved the bad credits that it received is not fair. It's not fair at all. I mean, Harrison Ford and Mackie and all these people and the same good crews that have been making the movies, the same amazing Captain America shield was there, so it's just unfair, maybe a timing thing for that. But so everything, Blade and Brave New World leading into Thunderbolts, and then reading a script like that and seeing the cast and Florence having just won awards, and we could just tell, and the crew that came together as a result of coming off of the strike, it was the energy and the vibe was there.
I think you had mentioned this when you were talking about Endgame too, but you had made a comment, something to the effect of the reshoots for some of these bigger budget movies, something like an Endgame or even like something like a Brave New World, basically takes up the amount of time that it would take to make a whole new film sometimes. Did you have any reshoots on Thunderbolts? It seemed like a very smooth sort of production process.
We did additional photography, and something I'm proud of and it's kind of cool is Russell had semi-retired in between principal production and additional photography. So I upgraded to Prop Master and got rehired for the additional photography on Thunderbolts. And so that was kind of a smooth transition for me. I had done some of my own prop mastering previously on Spider-Man, the second one with Jake Gyllenhaal. I don't remember the name of it.
Far From Home?
Far From Home. That was it. Sorry. Thank you so much. So I had done that in the past. And so the producers trusted me. And obviously they've known me for 19 years. They know that I know the game anyway. And so there was some additional photography. It wasn't near as much as Brave New World, of course. And I think Jake was sensitive to that. Actually, I know he was. He didn't want people to think that there was something wrong, that they needed to keep reshooting. But I really, you hit the nail on the head, is I don't think people realize how much goes into principal production and how much actually does go into additional photography on movies of this scale, with that much VFX, with that many big stars. A lot of times has to come down to actor availability even, you know what I mean? And it's like, a lot of people can create a lot of stories and theories about, well, there's all these reshoots and there's all this and there's all that. And it's like, well, we just couldn't get the actor. They were on this show or that show because you're dealing with, large groups of A-list actors and all sorts of things. So there was a little bit of additional photography on Thunderbolts, but it wasn't near as much as some. And I think it was due to the sensitivity around the reshoots on Brave New World. That's just my opinion. I'm not speaking for the company by any means, but that's kind of my guess.
Now, as I understand it, principal photography for this was done in Atlanta. Is that correct? Or was it more of a split production with more travel?
The travel ended up feeling pretty big. I mean, I guess you could say it was primarily filmed in Atlanta, but we were in Utah, we were in Malaysia, and that was all towards the end of the schedule. So to me, it's most recent in history. So it feels like the bigger portion of the film. But I think if you were looking at the number of days, I think it would say it was mostly shot in Atlanta, Utah, and then Malaysia for the big Merdeka stunt.
Headquartered in Atlanta. But yeah, of course, that desert stuff, I want to hear more about that Utah. And then let's go deeper on that Malaysia bit as well.
So Marvel always has, and I think they still just rent studio space. That's the extent of my knowledge on that because I'm not involved with. But so there was some large studios that were built, and I think they made a deal to kind of hang around. It's called now Trilith Studios, and Pinewood was a part of during Avengers, and I think now it's just called Trilith Studios. And we did not film there, and I think that was because a little bit of budgetary reasons, a little bit of lack of space, if I'm not mistaken. I know they have almost 32 stages there now, but I think Superman was going on or taking up a lot of space there from the DC world, and I don't know if they didn't want to mix. I don't know what the but I don't know what the reasons were, but oh, and also you know what it's called Atlanta Metro Studios is where we were, and the stages there have dividing walls that can open up, and that allowed for much larger sets, and I think that they wanted to there was some of the production design that needed that longer runs and some of the underground and the cave scenes in Thunderbolts and things like that needed much larger stage space. And so there's probably a handful of reasons why we were at Atlanta Metro, but and it's just down the street from Trilla. So we were very close to there. So yeah, Atlanta Metro Studios is the short answer to the short question.
And so Malaysia, that was for the jump off the building. Is that right? Was it that single scene out there, or did you guys have more for what you shot?
So no, there was some of the exterior as well. So yeah, it was the jump off the Merdeka, second tallest building in the world, which was just an experience all of its own for sure. And then when she leaves, so she jumps off that building and then lands on a different building, gets into a fight, then blows up the building and leaves with a little guinea pig. So all of that kind of section of the sequence was shot in Malaysia because it took place in Malaysia. It was a big undertaking. I know that we didn't know until about halfway or a little more through the film exactly what building the jump was going to happen off of. They were exploring a lot of different buildings, and there's a lot of different things like visas and permitting and just a million things that were required. And to pull that off, Jason Temez, the line producer on this one, I know him well. I've known him a long time. I've kind of seen him come up through the ranks as he's seen me come up through the ranks. And kudos to him. Oh my gosh, to handle that and to get it all pulled together, and even just the production meetings, you know, the nights before the pre-jumps and the actual jumps. And he handled himself so well, and he was so poised for that. I praise him for that, and being part of this Marvel team for so long, I think helped prepare him for that as well. He did a great job of it. Yeah, oh my gosh, health tests in Utah, like eye tests and like stress tests just to go to this top of this building. I don't think people are allowed where we were. It was just insane. And so Michael Huggins is stage one stunts, if I'm not mistaken. He did the rig atop the building. A little known fact, which is really, really cool. His uncle, who I haven't worked with, did the rig on the tallest building in the world with Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible. So this family are the people to do those. Like if you're going to trust anybody, these are the guys. And so for a little time when I was living in Atlanta, he was like my across the street neighbor, another guy that this couldn't have happened without. And I'm there, I'm like feeling like, do I really need to be here? I mean, like, so here's what I did for the jump is because I worked on Falcon Winter Soldier, and there was the squirrel suit scene in Falcon Winter Soldier at the very beginning of that series. I had done a lot of work with the jump team. There's a lot of similar people on the jump team and their equipment that they use, because it is our responsibility to order the shoots and make sure it's the specifications and things like that. And Jake, the director, had this gag where at the beginning she's sitting with actually a JanSport backpack on, and he didn't want people to know that she was about to parachute off the building. I think he was kind of going for a little, you know, reveal and emotional response, and like, oh man, what's she doing here? And so I actually had to work with JanSport and get approval and work with the jump teams and actually get like the JanSport logo onto the parachute, that little tag that's on the normal JanSport backpacks, and a JanSport logo that could break away for the chute on the back. And so that was my project. And so that's a big reason why I had to go, was to make sure that the stunt doubles and her and everything was tagged down. And so there was nothing, and so, but compared to the people that had to take Florence Pugh and let her step off the edge of the second tallest building in the world, I felt like, what am I doing here? Like any Malaysian person could have put this backpack on, like I sure, I worked with the companies to make them and whatever, but gosh, everyone was so cool and did such a great job. There was a techno crane on the top of the building. And I'm just like, they must have dismantled it and put it back together, because at the top, there was no elevator to get all the way where the solar panels were. Like, they had to part by part carry the crane up to the very top, and then put it back together. And it's like, it was just crazy. I mean, you could drive around the city in Kuala Lumpur and see the stunt people rehearsing the jumps, so that, like, Florence obviously would never be the first person to try the rig. So like, we're driving to the hotel from the airport, and it's like, oh, there's Sarah jumping off the building, and so it's just this like really surreal experience, and it was great. And there was obviously a fun rap party after in Malaysia and stuff like that. Then we blew up a building also, like in the same day.
Wait, so is the building explosion, is that practical? There's like
that was
actual
100% that was absolutely practical. We blew it up, and there are, so in the hotels in Malaysia and Kuala Lumpur, when you drive in, there's always bomb checks, and a mirror goes around the entire vehicle, and they check the trunk, every single car, every single time. It's an area, it's a highly Muslim country, which I didn't know at first, but I learned that. And so there are threats of bombings. They are definitely the most tame, like, non-aggressive people in the world, and I've traveled all around the world. And so it's like, didn't make sense to me. I mean, full circle is, we were blowing up a building in the middle of town, and they didn't put out any like bulletin or notice to people. We just cleared like a several block area, and we did have to let the police department know, obviously, and the fire departments, and all the permits had to clear and everything. But I'm just sitting there thinking, like, I wonder if like the actual pedestrians are going to start running and freaking out that this building exploded. I mean, like, we were literally blowing up a building where there are threats of bombings, like, on a regular basis. So it was kind of crazy, and fun. And Florence kind of let us know as well, is that the guinea pig was a little bitey. And there was lots of people around, and she was actually getting bit or nibbled on by that guinea pig while maintaining her character in that scene. So yeah, like to do that, and just being like bit by this random animal that you just met. She's just so great. She's great. Also, I mean, the cast, the crew, everyone was amazing. And Malaysia was something that I'll never forget, for sure.
Well, this almost seems like a dumb question now, but one of the things that I was going to ask, because I don't know if you were familiar, but a lot of the marketing push of this movie was kind of pitching it like Marvel returning to indie filmmaking, with like a lot of these like auteur creatives and artists and stuff like that. So this was almost pitched as like Marvel's indie movie, but then you immediately say, no, we really blew up a building in Malaysia. And it's kind of like, well, maybe that's not exactly the case. Did you guys have a sense that it was a little bit more of an intimate film, or was it still, this is still a big blockbuster Marvel movie?
I think they were insecure about that, about it reaching expectations. And so this whole Malaysia portion, I think, was planned in that way. It was to take it and say, and when they say, maybe when they were saying indie or auteur, I can personally attest to the fact that I would say there was 80% less visual effects, or let's call it 80% more attention on not doing it digitally, which is different, like coming off of a show like Guardians of the Galaxy, or coming off of a show like She-Hulk, where the entire main character is CG, and going into a very much more practical film, and the director wanted that very badly and would make that a priority on every single shot. I think that's more what they meant by it. The budget was still there, and we still were wanting to make a very large, action-packed Marvel film, but do it in a way that wasn't that maybe was more respected from the world of filmmakers. Is that we were flipping Humvees with real humans, stunt people inside. And like these days with VFX, you don't really have to do that anymore. Like they can digitally put a human inside of a Humvee that's rolling down the Utah desert, but we went old school with it. And there was like Shane, and I'm blanking on his last name right now, is like the son of a very famous stunt person who used to do it the old-fashioned way and roll cars and crash cars and precision picture car drivers, and he was in there like a direct descendant of somebody that had done that in the past and doing it the same way that they used to. He did a great job too, man. I think his was like the coolest flip of the Humvee. It was like really cool. It just kept flipping and rolling. And anyway, that's all practical. Those aren't CG shots. And I think in the films of the last 5 years or so, or a little bit more, those were leaning more towards VFX. And nobody got hurt, which was really cool. And I'm glad about that. And I mean, there were real base jumpers also jumping off of the Merdeka. It wasn't just Florence in her rig, but we actually jumped people off of the building. And so those shots are all real. There's nothing CG about them. It's really, we put wigs on the jump helmets so that her hair was actually on the jumper's helmet. Like all of that is just very, very real. We went through a lot to make everything real. And I will say also that there's this thing that happens when we make a prop and we know that it's going to turn into a visual effect prop. The visual effects team will like scurry up to us with these little orange dot stickers. And they'll say, hey, let me see that Chitauri gun. And I'm like, okay, here. And they'll put these little dots all over it. I'm like, okay, that's a VFX prop.
That's your clue.
Well, I mean, it's not a clue. It's just blatant at this point. It's like, oh, I see. They didn't like this. They're going to change it or whatever. Which, again, we have a huge volume of stuff that we do. And so inevitably, there will be certain things that in the conceptual phase they liked. But when it becomes a real prop, it's too late to make another one or whatever. And they'll just put these little dots on and it's a new prop in the film. No orange dots on all of Thunderbolts. Not one prop.
Wow.
Not one. Now, they might have enhanced some stuff or added lights or stuff, but nobody came up to me and was sticking little orange dots on anything. Maybe a cell phone or two. Like they always want to put those graphics in later. But as far as their hero props and things like that, no, they left them alone, and those are real. We actually made those, and I think that's what they kind of meant by this return to indie. That might have been a stretch a little bit with, yes,
Sure.
blowing up a building and jumping off the second tallest building in the world isn't very indie of us, but I think that's what they meant.
It's the practical work definitely shows up. I want to follow up. You had mentioned the car chase sequence, and there's a couple of specific props that I wanted to highlight in that car chase sequence, especially now that you say how much of the film is practical effects. The Molotov is one that I really was interested in because it's a very funny moment that then turns into a very cool moment that then turns again into a very funny moment after it sort of like deflates the whole thing. And I was curious because it looks very practical. Is that really something that you guys had built and structured? Is there a VFX element to it? Can you talk us through some of that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, that was real. That was a real Molotov cocktail. The only part that wasn't real is that we made it in Breakaway. The hard part of that is what it takes for special effects to make a Molotov cocktail and what it takes us to make a Breakaway is chemically not compatible. And so like the fuel they use to create the fire kind of just eats away at the Breakaway glass. And so it was time dependent. I'll be honest, I think it was a second unit shot, so I wasn't right there with it, but I was there for the conceptualization of it. And we had some real glass ones that were thrown, and then we had some Breakaway glass ones that were thrown, and that was really a Molotov cocktail that was on fire and got thrown. Absolutely. I'm sure it got enhanced a little bit. And we did do a different shot of, like the fire hitting the windshield of the Humvee and stuff as well. So that was all practical. But they have to make it look good. I mean, there's always colorization on a film and everything else. So I'm sure it was touched, but I would call it 95 or 97% practical. Yeah.
And how about the mines that Bucky shoots? Because those, like the way they magnetically attach, I was like, I was so impressed with how, but I at the time was like, oh, that's got to be VFX because of how the like there's just the way it like hits and clinks so
Yeah.
precisely.
So here is some real cool MCU history. If people really know the MCU, is what you will notice is that I personally took the one remaining Winter Soldier belt, his original one from Captain America Winter Soldier, and rebuilt it four different times because we can't just go with just one. And now that's like in archive and we can't use that one. And I rebuilt the thing with the same 40 millimeter grenades in the belt, with the same drop holster, with the same knives in his back. And that was Sebastian's request. He's like, I want to take this back. I want to take this back to old school Winter Soldier. He was so kick ass that I want to tap back into that part of my character. And I also carried over for him his dog tags, his Bucky Barnes dog tags that I don't ever think make it on camera, but he wears them every day. Real Bucky Barnes dog tags underneath his shirt. We lay him on this velvet pad in his dressing room with his costumer, Valentina. In the morning, I'll go lay out some stuff for her, his belt and his little dog tags, and he wears them. And he's tried to pull them out a few times, and sound always is like, oh, the dog tags, and the directors are like, oh, that's dangling, and they always make him kind of tuck them back in or whatever. But he wears them, and that's important to him as a character. But so full circle, that gun is the same gun that he used in Winter Soldier with the Nick Fury car crash. So if you'll notice, like if you go back and watch that, you're like, oh, those are the same discs and the same gun. I had to completely rebuild it. It was so destroyed and broken from sitting in a warehouse and getting moved and this and that from, I don't know, must have been 13 plus years ago when it was originally made. And obviously our technology and our knowledge these days is a lot better of how we manufacture things. And so I had to like take it all apart. We also had to make molds of it for rubber because he's riding on a motorcycle with it with one hand and all of these things. And so we kind of rebuilt all the old Winter Soldier stuff. And that's where that's from. And how the gag worked was I have one mounted in the gun for when he's riding so it doesn't fall out or hurt anybody. And then I drilled Forstner bit holes. It's kind of like becoming a maker nerd to show you guys who I truly am on the inside. But so I used Forstner bits and rare earth magnets to kind of bury these rare earth magnets in the bottom of the disc, and then we magneted it to the Humvee and did a little like plate shot of like clicking right onto it, so you kind of get the vibe of what it would really do. But the in between, yes, is the effect, and that's the same thing kind of for Cap's shield. Is we do the beginning practically and we do the end practically, and then the in between, because no human can throw a shield, or we couldn't shoot that projectile fast enough to kind of sell it in camera. So that is something that VFX helps us with, is kind of that in between. But we do everything at the beginning and the end practically.
While we're on Bucky, can we talk about Bucky's arm? Because obviously it's been sort of iterated a lot over the years. It's obviously changed just in terms of the creative sort of storytelling over the course of the MCU for so long. I think the arm is the perfect example of maybe drawing the line for people who may not know, where does costuming end and props begin with something like the arm? Because you even have the gag of like it literally being in the dishwasher and stuff like that. Like,
Yeah.
like where is the line drawn? Where do you guys kind of divvy that out?
Valentina and I grew up together. Her dad was a very famous costumer, and that's Sebastian's costumer and longtime friend. And my dad, Russell, worked together 30, 40 years ago when we were little kids. And we were both little film rats, like walking around Universal and getting into the Jurassic Park ride and stuff like that. So we've known each other since we were kids. And it is a very close crossover relationship. It depends. It really depends on what's going on. But so she has like this prosthetic that goes, and they use, I believe, KY to get it on. It's very tight prosthetic hand and arm for him that he can wear. If the arm ever comes off or is used in a fight or is in a dishwasher or the door millage hit the buttons and it falls off, then I'm there underneath him, catching the arm so it doesn't break, and it's hitting me in the face. And so we work together almost every day. Like I said, the dog tags and his arm and things like that as well. How about the chili scene when he's eating the Ben's chili bowl? There's only so many white shirts that they have, and I have my chili, and so I need to go ahead of time and be like, hey, Valentina, like he might spill chili on his shirt. Are you okay with that? Like, we have meetings way ahead of time so they can have extra shirts. And so costumes and props work very, very closely together on those things. But in short, if he's using it or it's outside of his body, it's us. If it's his arm and it's on him, it's costumes and obviously augmented with VFX.
Sebastian Stan is also a good example of someone that you have worked with for years. You did the show in between all of the primaries, right? Except for Lewis Pullman playing Sentry Void. They've all showed up in other shows. And so I'm curious who you had relationships with or who maybe you were working with on set for the first time.
Wyatt was in Falcon Winter Soldier, Wyatt Russell. Dude is so cool. He is so cool. I really like the guy. I'm going to pitch. He has an adult beverage company called Lake Hour. And he was like talking about it with everybody. He was giving crew gifts. And what's funny is like I personally own, like in my personal time, I own a lake boat. I'd like to wakeboard and stuff. And his company is geared exactly towards who I am as a person. So anyway, I would consider him a good friend. I don't know if he would the same, but I love it. The concept of his company is he really liked the seltzer drinks that came out, but he didn't like the girly can. And so he put a cool seltzer drink in a dude can and calls it Lake Hour. And I love it. The flavors are great. They did a great job with it. I'm like now doing a commercial for Wyatt. But
well, he's going to have to pay us. All right. So put us in touch. He's going to have to sponsor this episode.
I'll let him know. No, I'll let him know. I will say the flavors are good and they did a great job with using natural ingredients and stuff. It just vibed with me. And so this is the second show that I've worked with him on. And I do have to work with him closely because he also has a shield and he wears it on his back. And so there's just tons of work with him as well. So Sebastian and Wyatt were the two that I think I've known for the longest. JLDR, Julia Louis Dreyfus, I worked with on Falcon Winter Soldier as well a little bit. So we had worked together before, but the rest were all new to me. I hadn't worked with Florence yet. I think Black Widow was filmed in UK, and I don't usually go there unless it's just for some short, location work. And so if the whole film is getting shot over there. So I didn't know David Harbour. I didn't know Florence. Taskmaster wasn't there as much as we once thought she was going to be.
That was played by Olga. I think her last name is pronounced Kurylenko.
Yeah. And Ghost. I hadn't worked with her before.
Hannah John Cameron.
Yeah. She was a very sweet lady too, British girl. It was neat to see Florence and her chatted up because they're two British girls and they have their lingo and their accents and like it's fun. It was a very fun environment. I've worked with a lot of actresses throughout time and for how talented these few are and how they could definitely get away with being more prima donnas, they definitely did not do that. They were very, down to earth, very cool people, very communicative if they didn't like something or they did. And they were articulate in how to explain that. And no one time did I ever feel put off by anybody on the crew. And David Harbour's hilarious. And so we all got along quite well. And the more we started traveling together, that's when you really start to become friends with people too.
And speaking of these actors, the other part I think that's interesting about this is because all these characters have appeared in the MCU before, their props are legacy as well. And so I'm curious as we go through which ones are updated or which ones are carrying the legacy of what was established before for these characters.
Right. Like I said, a lot of the Bucky stuff was reimagined and renewed from his old stuff in Captain America Winter Soldier. And then everything else was relatively new, even Walker's shield, because I think the director wanted some distress on there to show that he has actually still been working for Valentina de Fontaine. And so that was new. All of Yelena's stuff was new. Hannah or Ghost stuff was a hybrid. Like we don't have much for her, but she took some of Taskmaster's props after the big battle underground there in
Mm.
the vault. So she had a few things that were new because they weren't hers. And then David Harbour, that was all new too. And those were practical knives. We didn't manufacture those that he had, and a couple of weapons in his back holsters. And that was all just kind of his request. And so some of his character development came from our meetings with him of what he was going to do in some of these scenes. So that was kind of fun to work with him on. He's a very, very creative guy. And so, yeah, it was all kind of new. It really was. It was all kind of new.
There was something I wanted to talk about just specifically when it comes to John Walker, because I think my favorite visual gag in the film, maybe one of my favorite visual gags in the MCU, is the taco shield and how long he has it on for, and constantly watching him in the background struggle to try to take it off and be unable to. Did you did you guys have a whole separate prop for that shield? And my follow-up to this question also is because something you said in Endgame is that Cap's shield is his average shield life is like 3 shoots or something, like it's something
Yeah,
crazy like that. Was
yeah,
it the
three
same?
scenes.
Was it the same lifespan in this one?
Well, it's 3 scenes is a cap shield, and that's a hero cap shield because if it gets dinged or scratched at all, it's done. We can't use it. And same with the rubber ones. Like the rubber ones are more for fighting and running and all that, so they get dinged up faster. And so yeah, the average lifespan is 3 scenes for a shield. The major favor that was done to us inadvertently was that pre-damage on his shield, on Walker's shield for this movie. We could get away with way, way, way more because it was already pre-damaged. And so if an extra ding or scratch was on there, it'd almost be impossible to, pause a frame and try and track the continuity on the scratches on his shield. So, which I'm sure someone will do. Now that we talk about it, I'm like, I'm going to get an email, or my dad's going to get an email. Like,
Well, that probably won't happen until people can watch it at home and do freeze frame all the way
Yeah,
through. So we might have a
exactly,
little bit
exactly,
of a window before that is documented online.
exactly. But are you ready for this one? Drum roll, please. The taco shield was a practical prop gag. And what we had to do in order to get that to happen in camera is just unreal and not inexpensive by any means. Yes, we had to make, his shield pre-taco and post-taco. And so we had, yes, a whole rolling cart of taco shields, and we had a whole rolling cart of non-taco shields. And we had to manage the inventory of those amongst splinter unit and second unit and first unit and make sure that everybody had enough of them in case one got damaged, in case a handle broke or whatever. And yeah, that was a practical prop. We went through many prototypes to see how a human could really bend a shield around someone's arm. Obviously, it's not metal. It's more of a resin or like a soft kind of rubber, but then the armature inside also had to be such that it was resettable. Budgetarily, we couldn't just make a bunch of shields that would bend one time and not be able to reset them. That would have been astronomical. So the armature inside had to be able to, we had to be able to, take it back to our tool cart and re-flatten it out again and make sure that it looked, on the front of it looked okay. And so we had 2 or 3 of those in case they broke, but no more than that. And then the rest of the movie, once it was bent, those were all practical as well. They were already just pre-made in that bent shape.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's another scene in the movie because this also is partly John Walker's scene, but it's a bonding moment and it feels very improvisational, but it's kind of a love letter to the props in a way. And it's the scene where they're sitting in the back of the truck and they're all talking about the different guns that they have. And I was like, oh my, did Travis just write this scene for them and just get this in there? Or like, what was that?
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad that you caught on to that. Day 2, well, I'm going to say day 00 of shooting because there was a couple of pre-shoot days and I don't know why they do that. It's a budgetary thing where, like there was 2 pre-shoot days. I think it was maybe day 00, double or 0. I was new to the crew, new to the writing staff, new to some of these producers. I knew a lot of the other ones. But, Russell's in the truck and they're doing some big gag and some getaway scene. And I'm the only one available to break away for a moment from actually making Bucky's belts to like, hey, the writers want to talk to you. Like, can you come to Producer Village? Not a very common call on the walkie for a prop department. And I felt like I immediately went back to like when the teacher calls you up to the front of class and starts asking you all these questions from what they just lectured on for the last hour. And we're like, hey, so I'm writing this scene. They're going to be in the back of the van and they're going to be like comparing how cool their weapons are. So, what does everyone have? And I was just like, huh? Because, you know, Yelena has guns and Alexi has guns and Walker has guns and Bucky has guns. And like, for people that don't know guns, that shouldn't be too overwhelming. But for people who know guns and for a person like myself who knows that they're about to write dialogue about what these guns are, is that this was a very important conversation that I wasn't prepared for by any means, or they didn't give me any heads up on whatsoever. And it was super improv on my part. And I had to recall on the spot in front of the entire producer village and the writers every single person's weapon and what they have.
Oh my
And I
God.
was just like, and it was like the second day of shooting, not like, oh, we've been on this for 6 months and now I'm going to be able to tell you everything we've been working with every single day. Luckily, pat myself on the back, I'm very good at my job and I had no problem with it whatsoever. As a matter of fact, some of the creative producers and the line producers' jaws were dropping a little bit in awe that I could just rattle off every single weapon of who had what and what it was. And I'm like, yeah, Yelena has a Glock 19 and Walker has it's a 45 caliber, the attack ops. And, you know, like I may be right or wrong at this point. I think those are correct, but maybe she has a Glock 17. See, it's actually, I think hers is a 17, not a 19. But anyway, I was able to rattle it off and everyone was super impressed. And yeah, I guess I once removed wrote that scene. Yes.
Well, so there you go. We have to add another addendum to the intro to say Travis Bobbitt, writer as well. That is incredible. I'm curious as well about the helmets. Was that a costuming thing? Because they do also highlight the helmets in that scene as well.
Yeah, that's all costumes.
Got it.
And I'm so glad because they're super uncomfortable. And then when they take them on and off, it pulls their hair, it pinches their skin. And because they, you know, there's this common thing that's like, I don't know, people realize how difficult it is for the costume department to create lines on these characters that live up to the comics. Because in a comic, you have an artist drawing a singular line that can be perfect and they can redraw it and whatever. And these costumers, these costume designers, Sonia in this case, and a lot of the costumers going back and their assistants work super hard to try and recreate those lines. And they have a lot of pressure put on them because VFX doesn't want to be going in there and cleaning up every single costume. They do a really good job of streamlining the helmets, of streamlining the suits and everything. And we work very closely with them. Like imagine putting a 8 or 10 pound shield on the back of a costume. And what does that do to the fabric? And what does that, you know, how does that change the line of the costume? And we add holsters on the sides and like, how do we not make it stick out too far? Or holsters inside of a coat? And, you know, just a million things that you would never realize. I mean, I guess a good segue to me is what I've been learning these past few bigger films is we have a breakdown of the script of every prop in the movie. And that Excel spreadsheet is 15,000 lines long. Now, that's not unique props, right? That's just every time a prop shows up in a scene. There are 15,000 things that we have to remember every movie and make sure that the continuity is correct on their gun, on their this, on their shield, on the that. And of course, we have a very big team of people to help us oversee that and the spreadsheet and other documents that help keep us in order and in line every day and every week. But, you know, schedules change, as you know, Skid, like stuff happens and people get COVID and this happens and that. And so we need to be able to on the fly draw from this list of 15,000 things and know exactly where it is and have it where it needs to be and when it needs to be there without holding up company and costing them a lot of money. So it's pretty crazy.
I have one more question about the guns because I'm sure that Skid wants to ask questions about other characters, but I just have to ask one more. Like, John Walker's my guy. I think he's the funniest guy. So
Yeah, he's great.
One more thing. John Walker has a very specific way of reloading his gun where he extracts the clip like he's mad at it. And I was like, That has to be a visual effect because it flies out of that gun. Is it visual effect? Is it practical? You have to tell us how you do something like that.
Two things with John Walker in that scene. One is that was practical. And sorry, I have to circle back. I got to just correct you on one thing, and I'm sorry. It's just I'll get yelled at if I don't. There's only one gun of all time that is called a clip. The rest it's called a magazine.
Thank you, because I don't know anything about guns.
Yeah, and I think it was like an M1
Distinction.
Garand from World War II or something had a clip. But
Yes, please continue to educate our audience on
okay.
all aspects of this.
So what I do is I take the magazine and I push it 99% of the way in just before it clicks. And so that he does have you have a magazine release on the weapon, but a lot of times once pushing it, it wouldn't do that action all at the same time. And so when I'm prepping the weapon for him for that scene, I just don't quite click it in. And sometimes I have to put just a little, maybe top stick, which is like toupee tape or something in there just to make sure it doesn't fall out beforehand. But it's still loose enough that when he does that action, it just flies out. And then the other is he catches that knife.
That's right.
Yelena's knife gets thrown at him, and he catches it, and one other person catches it. And VFX, the director, and everybody in the production meetings were like, well, that's just a VFX. And I was like, well, okay. So VFX then comes and talks to me. He's like, well, can you create like an elastic band around their hand? Because they need to be able to close their hand around it, but the knife needs to be there beforehand. And so I'm like, okay, let me just ponder it. And like, I don't know if I was sleeping or in the shower or something. And I created this rig. I took one of the existing screws in the knife and bored it out with a drill bit and made this tiny little, gosh, what would you call it? It's just like a hidden, I guess it's just a little screw that, it wouldn't hurt them. It was just a smooth washer and a screw that they could hide in between their fingers. I know people listening can't see, but you just squeeze it in between their fingers. And so the knives, when they catch it, those are not VFX knives. They have the knife in their hand and you just wouldn't be able to see. It's like a magician's trick. You know what I mean? It's like sleight of hand. I created this little sleight of hand gag for them with that knife. And so I had two knives, one in each person's hand. And so that they could throw and release and then catch without having any straps or any, like rotoing or anything to do with those knives, and no one would otherwise know. And I built it into where the existing screw was. And so it's just completely hidden. And it was actually kind of cool. So that was a tough scene. That fight scene was very, very difficult. We had paperwork in there. We had all the heroes' weapons. And I believe that was one of the first scenes we shot in the movie. So it really warmed us up quickly, And so that was kind of a fun, a couple of John Walker gags that we had built.
Travis, as well, what other favorite props do you have coming out of this?
Gosh, there's so many. It's hard to just narrow it down to one.
No. It doesn't have to be one.
Yeah, as Cap always says, I could do this all day, man. Like,
okay. One that I thought was really fun and cool that took a lot of effort. It was very hot and very difficult and very uncomfortable, was all the weapons on top of the Humvees. There was some sound wave, weapons on top of there for Ghost that could affect Ghost. There was 50 caliber machine guns on there with, remote controlled heads on them. Usually would be a person, a manned weapon. And so that was, us with special effects kind of, and then we were manufacturing the sound. There was like a way better word for this. It's like pulse something weapons. But anyway, we manufactured all those and we had to mount them on Humvees, and it had to be able to drive at speed, and they had to roll and break and explode, and like all these things that were going on. So that was kind of a fun thing that people, I don't think, would realize, that a prop department is up in the desert in 104 degrees on a metal Humvee with metal 50 calibers, rigging things and like getting to move them remote. And Humvees in the desert at 104 degrees break down. And so we have to move 50 calibers to new Humvees, and we have to just be out in the desert in the middle of nowhere and be able to do anything. So that's one that was really exciting. Yeah, the Utah desert was just beautiful. I had never realized how amazing some of the sites were going to be there. And off camera, like we had met one day on an off day, there was something called the beach in the middle of Utah. And I'm like, the beach? That doesn't sound right. But we were in Green River, Utah. And I believe this part of where we were was either the Colorado River or it might have been the actual Green River at this spot. I'm not totally sure, but we were all just hanging out and having a day off. And it's in a canyon with, what to anyone else would seem like the Grand Canyon or something, just these vast, huge canyons. And there was a rapid, and you could kind of ride a little inner tube and it would take you in a circle around this beach. It was like a local spot. It was really cool. And we learned from some of the locals where it is, but we're all just hanging out one day, minding our business. And in the distance, we hear like, I'm like, is somebody filming? Like, we're off today. Like, is this another film company? And from, I'm not kidding, felt like 30, 40 feet above us, 3 Apache helicopters flying through the canyon over our heads. And they buzzed us. Like we could see the draft from the propellers in the water. And I'm like, what in the world is just happening? So Utah was another place where there are stories that I will just never forget. So there was a moment in Utah where there was a real life scorpion ended up on Florence's costume. And she didn't panic and she didn't freak out. And I even think they continued with the scene, and she's like, there's a scorpion, a real scorpion. So we were actually out in the middle of nowhere desert. Like we were in the trenches out in Utah. But I think the production value out of it was well worth it. Some of the most beautiful sights I've ever seen and some fun stories. And again, another Florence keeping character when crazy things are going on. Even there was another moment with Florence in the desert in the gas station where an actual Black Widow was on the set. And instead of freaking out and like, get this spider out of here, she wanted to take pictures with it because she's the Black Widow. And I was like, oh, okay. And so just some fun stories. She's a cool person, and Utah was crazy and we were in the elements, but it was well worth it.
That spider was probably a fan, probably came to set and was hoping for exactly that selfie itself.
Yeah.
Big follower.
I feel like that's a great omen. Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
I have to ask, just because there was something that you mentioned in the very beginning of I'm sorry I keep bringing it up, but I'm also not sorry. Again, great episode. The Avengers Endgame episode that you guys did together. There's something that you brought up in the beginning of it that Kevin Feige, all the way back to Iron Man, was layering in these little Easter egg details that were kind of telegraphing where he wanted to go throughout. And it dated all the way back to that first film.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm sure you cannot tell us what they are, but can you just tell us, are there any of those elements hidden throughout Thunderbolts?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's kind of a coined phrase now internally, and we call them Easter eggs. And I think everyone maybe knows that term, but there are Easter egg meetings on every single movie now. So what was just him doing it and us not knowing at the beginning of things has now become a regular occurrence, and everyone understands that culture. And it's been established now. And I think that's part of him not being able to be everywhere at once when we were doing all these different streamers and films all at the same time, is that they've done a good job of creating the culture of what worked. And so, yes, there are Easter eggs in this one, and hopefully those at home will pause and freeze frame things. And then in the future, we will be able to connect the dots yet again.
Sure. And definitely don't tell us what they are.
I could tell you one that's kind of cool. And I don't know that this has anything to do with a future, but there's a past Easter egg. It was having to do with the sign that the chicken or the rooster was spinning in the void. And so Bob, in his methed out chicken suit, is spinning a sign. And I was asked to come up with a comic book Easter egg on that sign. And it's Alfredo's bail bonds. And Alfredo actually did appear in the comics. I did a whole report on it so I could pitch them on it, and it worked. I don't remember exactly where he appeared, but he actually got married to a comic book character. He was supposed to be cooked and eaten, but he got free, and then he ended up marrying a human. It was a very comic book thing, but his name was Alfredo, and the image of the rooster on the sign is modeled after how he appeared in the comic. So you can pause and look at Alfredo's bail bonds and go onto Marvel Wiki, and you can see that Alfredo is actually a comic book character.
It's like a Howard the Duck sighting. It's like
Very similar, very similar. Yeah, we talk about Howard the Duck a lot.
We'll give our listeners some homework on that one.
Yeah.
Gianni reminded me when we talked about the episode we did on Endgame, something else that struck me in how production was done then is you talked about how tight the script was, where you didn't even get to see the script through all of filming. Here you talked about having a script and seeing where the story was going. Was that because of the difference between in-game and this, or has there been a general loosening of the, I don't know, the secrecy aspects for Thunderbolts or these Marvel projects in general?
There was a little bit of loosening just because of the grandeur of what happened at the end of Endgame was just such a huge moment that I understand why they didn't release the last, whatever, 20 pages of the script. But on this one, there was some secrecy because of, that last press conference that I loved because that was reminiscent of Iron Man 1 when he goes, I am Iron Man. And then I just loved that moment. I did say to Jake and Harry, the editor, when I got to see this early on, was this might be my favorite Marvel film since Iron Man. And I think that press conference was part of it for me. It kind of just nails it. And it draws that excitement. But so there was secrecy there. I don't think that part where they said, the new Avengers was in the script. And also, there's a lot of cast in that scene, a lot of background in that scene, a lot of crew that was there at that New York street, which, by the way, was all built by us. We didn't go to New York for that. That was all built, and it was amazing. I could not believe it. It's beautiful. They did such a great job. But JLD, she had one set of lines for when the background and a lot of the crew was there, and then they walked everybody out and she read the lines again with the new Avengers, so they were able to keep that secret. So there's still some things that they definitely don't want leaked and stuff like that, but nothing yet as big as the moment that was Tony Stark dying.
Do you remember what the original line was, like the fake line?
Oh, and she just called them the Thunderbolts instead of the New Avengers.
Oh, cool.
She's like, let me introduce to you Thunderbolts. Yeah, it was an easy swap. Wasn't hard for her to remember both.
So again, we don't want to put you on the spot for spoilers, but give us a sense of where this series is going. There is a scene at the very end, as I understand, was actually shot by the Russo brothers in London, where they're filming the new Avengers movies that are coming out to kind of tie things together. Was that available to you guys early, or was that a surprise to you, the way they wrap things up and tied it together? And again, what can you tell us about what's next for Marvel?
I have to be honest, I don't know much because they went off to England. And like we talked about before, I don't work out there. And so, I've heard grumblings and I have, friends that are still out there and stuff like that. I know that the Thunderbolts or the New Avengers are a part of it. And I know that's public information. So I know that I can share that. I know that Evans is going to be there. I know that Downey's going to be there. And I know that the Russo brothers and Castaldi, the first AD, and a lot of the people that were all there on Infinity War and Endgame are there. And so I can just tell by what they're putting together that it's going to be epic.
Yeah,
it's going to be really, really big. And, the costume designers and a lot of the people from assets and things were all visiting. And I was having to ship some of the Thunderbolt stuff off to England before we were even done filming. So I don't know much because, this is probably another one of those, they want to keep big secrets. And I know Matt Shackman and Fantastic Four is going to be released here soon. So, I think from what I understand, and just seeing some of the press for Thunderbolts and who's there as the actors promoting and stuff like that, they're planning something really, really big. And I'm excited. I'm bummed not to be a part of it, but I'm okay with it too. Again, I needed a break. So yeah, it's something big, but it's about all I can say. And I do know some stuff, but I don't want to shoot myself in the foot, like to still have a job. So
nor would we want you to, Travis, but I am also curious, and this is more of a larger story about filming in general. I've heard stories that Marvel is downsizing their footprint and has left the Atlanta area. I'm curious if you know about any projects that maybe I've overlooked, or
there's no filming going on, not the streamers, not any features. I do believe there will be 2 Avengers movies going on in London. Also, a new Spider-Man in London, which is Sony, but they're kind of, and I think that's interesting that they're all staying close. I don't know. I mean, maybe you can draw your own conclusions from that. I'm an LA hire, and so I'm out of LA, and they've sent me home and they've said thank you for your 19 years of service. And I think that was a part of my dad retiring as well. I don't think he wanted to start like a whole new leg of his career, especially since he was already retirement age, and he's still working. He's doing manufacturing and consulting and stuff for films because he's just one of the best at that there is. So he's semi-retired. Once he passed retirement age, he stopped counting the Mondays until retirement, and he's like, well, maybe I should just do it. And that was part of it. They're like, hey, it was nice having you. And they did that with the longtime special effects department head Dan Sudik as well. I think they all had lunch with Kevin and Lou, and they all had a little tear shed, maybe like the end of an era. I have heard rumors of maybe a little something here or there going to Atlanta, but nothing concrete. It is financial based. I did hear, it's just, I think the way it was put is they were saying they were getting costed out of the US. Is that some of these negotiations that were happening to try and protect the workers and give them, what they're due just became too expensive. And so then they kind of had to look elsewhere. And I don't want to say that Disney and Marvel led the charge of that, but they're so big that, if they are to do something like that, I think people just kind of, other producers are like, well, they're doing it, so there must be a reason. And so, I've turned down 4 or 5 projects. I do get calls still to do stuff, but they aren't quite what I'm used to as far as size and compensation. And I really truly am an artist in that way where I am okay, without being too personal, that I'm okay to not do a film here or there. Like I'm a big real estate person, and I know we have a mutual friend, Scott, and we're always talking, and so I'm a business person outside of film as well. So I've said no to about 4 or 5 projects that just weren't my jam, and wouldn't play to my expertise of manufacturing things and what I've got going on. So, and then some that just couldn't afford my kit, my tools or whatever. So it is a kind of an issue in the States right now. There's a lot of out of work film people, and I'm lucky to say that I'm one that it doesn't affect too much because, I have other things going on, but I know there's a lot of, young people in the industry that got hit hard. Maybe they just bought their first house and they're hurting, they can't pay their mortgage, or, if they have young families and kids, now they're living with their parents and stuff like that. So, on my end, I'm taking this time. Actually, you added writer to my resume. I signed up, and this is weird. A lot of my friends are like, why did you do this? I applied for a scholarship to NYU Tisch. It's a new online program that they had released, and I have children, so I couldn't just disappear to New York or Manhattan for a few years to get a film degree. But because I've worked so closely with so many amazing directors since a young kid, I've been on camera and off camera since a young kid. I always thought that I should be directing. There's some directors I've worked with that I'm in awe of and I've learned so much from. And there's other directors where I'm like, maybe I could have done a better job, So I'm learning to direct right now. I did secretly write a 110-page screenplay for Blade that I'm going to submit. I'm having trouble getting an agent, of all things, to submit for me, which is like so crazy. But anyway, I wrote a screenplay and did a pitch deck for Blade. I'd love to be able to direct Blade. I saw that movie as a kid. It was one of my favorites. I thought Wesley Snipes was so cool in that movie. And I did get a chance to meet with Mahershala when we were trying to make Blade before, and I was doing props. And I just kind of felt this vibe, like, I really, this movie they need me. I can direct this movie, but, pitching that to, the largest production company in the world is a little bit harder than you would imagine, even though I've worked for them for 19 years, maybe even a little harder because they only see me in one light. And so that's why I signed up for NYU, because they draw a lot of directors from there. So I wanted to see what that was about. And of course, I know my job very, very, very well, but I don't know, the other aspects of distribution and writing screenplays and stuff like that. And so, I've written now 2 shorts, a full screenplay. I'm working on another full screenplay, and I hope to direct soon. And or if Marvel or some big production company has this huge manufacturing prop show, I would love to go do it. I'll take my prop truck and go wherever we go in the world and do it. So I'm having fun. I'm, flipping houses right now and writing scripts, and I hope that everybody in the negotiation world comes together and figures it out for filming abroad, but also filming back in the US, because there are a lot of very talented filmmakers here right now that aren't doing much. And so that seems like kind of a shame. These artists are super talented and they're not doing anything. So I hope that gets all settled. I'm optimistic about it, but also fatalistic. Like there's not much I can do about it other than maybe becoming a director and being a director that can put his foot down and say, hey, I'll do this, but we got to do it in the States. And I want to do it with these people who I know and love and who are so amazing at their job. And I know that stage 1 stunts isn't going to hurt an actor. And I know that, the video playback, Jesse and all the guys, and the DIT guys and Kyle and all these guys that can make these movies like Avengers can make art again. I hate to lose really good art because of money, it's kind of sad.
Well, that's an amazing next step of your career. We're very excited to hopefully be able to talk to you again when you're a working director.
Yeah, Travis.
Yeah, I hope so.
I know we're below the line, but even when you're above the line, you got to come back and tell those stories from our perspective.
We'll change the title just for one episode.
Yeah, change the name for the episode.
These are challenging times, and it is a bit of a downer for a lot of folks, but also recognizing that. And so while, we don't mean to end it down, Travis, you're telling the story and with the optimism that I hope is contagious. Good luck to you. And on that note, we will call this episode a wrap. Travis, I'm really glad you made it back. This was a lot of fun.
Oh my gosh, thanks for having me. Sorry if I talked way too much, but I always love coming and telling stories and anytime, you guys. Really, really appreciate it.
No, dude, thank you so much. This was an absolute blast. Yeah, we could talk for 8 more hours and still wouldn't be enough. So you're fine.
I'm sure. All right, thanks guys. You have a good day.
Listeners, I always appreciate your feedback. You'll find my contact info at our website, belowtheline1word.biz. That's B-I-Z. You'll also find more than 260 past episodes, so if you're a new listener, check out the catalog. My closing credits, thanks to Curtis Five for our music, John Wan for our logo, and to all of our listeners, I appreciate you. If you're a fan of Below the Line, consider a purchase. The logo is available on t-shirts, mugs, and stickers at redbubble.com. Other ways you can help. First, give us a positive rating wherever you get your podcast. Second, and this is really important, tell your friends about an episode you enjoyed, because that's how we gain new listeners. All of that aside, whatever your engagement, the fact that you're still listening means a lot to me. Thanks again from Below the Line.
I forgot where I was going with all that, but yeah, I mean,
it'll be much cleaner in post. I promise. Don't worry.
Sure. That's fine.
Your chain of thought will go straight through. But talking about getting into Thunderbolts.
My goal. Yes, my goal is always to make it least editing possible for you, of course. Just trying to be that people pleaser,
Listen, I appreciate that.
Yeah, no worries.